I never knew such a day could come. I never knew such a love would be signed upon. I never knew what my life was. Welcome to the Taking Care of Business podcast. Today's segment is entitled Collaborating for Mental Well-Being, How Social Impact and Project Management Align. We have with us Ms. Christian Agu, and I will tell you a little bit about her shortly. My name is Chris Houston. I am a native Houstonian. I now reside in Waco, Texas, and I am an attorney, legal educator, nonprofit executive director, and public servant. It is my distinct pleasure to host this podcast and bring you what I believe to be relevant and helpful information and updates on events and programs offered in the greater Waco and Central Texas areas, some of which will be unique to Waco and McLennan County, and some of which will be relevant to people in other cities and even other states. Thank you, Pastor Stimson, for making this podcast possible and giving us a platform to serve our community. And thank you for joining us, Ms. Agu.
Thank you for having me.
This is my Southern upbringing. I hear my mom's voice in the background saying, put a handle on it. Christian and I are friends, and I have mentored her for several years, but I am not that informal in settings like this. And so she's Ms. Agu to me today. Ms. Agu is the Assistant Director of Community Relations in the Baylor University External Affairs Office. She organizes the semi-annual Gil Taylor Behavioral Health Series at Baylor also, which is free and open to the public. Ms. Agu is here to tell us more about the Spring 2025 Gil Taylor Luncheon and to share with us how she draws upon her training as a social worker and project manager to provide impactful resources and programs to our community. As we work to connect our community with access to much needed resources, Ms. Agu and I find ourselves working and volunteering in the same spaces quite frequently. It has been a pleasure to work alongside Ms. Agu, and it is also a pleasure to grant her a platform to share with you today. I am pleased to formally introduce our special guest, and here's the good part, to tell you a little bit about her educational and professional background and experience. So she is a licensed master social worker and certified project management professional dedicated to community engagement and social impact. As Assistant Director of Community Relations at Baylor University's Office of External Affairs, she builds bridges between the university and the Waco community, stewarding resources to support key initiatives that offer learning and development to students, practitioners, and community members. I have had the benefit of attending some of those programs, and I assure you they are all very well organized and very informative. Her work includes leading impactful health and education events, such as the semi-annual Gil Taylor Behavioral Health Speaker Series that has reached over 300 attendees in 2 years. Ms. Agu holds a bachelor's degree in social work from Georgia State University in her hometown of Atlanta, Georgia, and a master's degree in social work from Baylor University. Outside of work, she enjoys cooking, binge watching thriller TV series, reading, or listening to audiobooks, and spending time with loved ones. Ms. Agu, thank you again for joining us today. And without further ado, let's get to it. So, what inspired you to pursue a career in social work? That's the first part of the question. The second part of the question is, and how did project management become a key part of your approach?
Yes. So before I jump into that, I do want to say thank you again to you, Ms. Houston, for allowing me to come in and just share a little bit about what I do and what's happening in my neck of the woods. I appreciate, of course, that ongoing support and getting to work with you on a lot of these initiatives as well.
Thank you.
Of course. So yes, what inspired me to pursue a career in social work? I am one of those maybe unique animals that knew what I wanted to do for a very long time. So I grew up in a community that was really riddled or burdened with poverty. We were a lot of just divestment, struggling through our school systems, and all these different overlapping social problems. And so, as a person kind of coming up in that type of environment, I often looked around and just wondered about like what was missing, what did we need that would help us, what could be there to help us have mobility, to help us improve, to help us just be a better community. And so when I was in high school, through several interactions with different social workers via my school and community, I just got really inspired and decided, hey, I think I'm gonna become a social worker. So of course at 14, there was a very different understanding of what that could look like,
Right.
what that could mean.
Right.
But I got to study at Georgia State, as you mentioned earlier. And so that was kind of my exposure to what this profession is and what it could be. And I think I knew even from those few years that whatever I would do with my social work degree would not be conventional.
Right. But that's not your nature anyway.
It's not.
Whether it's work, whether it's community work, yeah, that's who you are.
Yes, I always want to go against the grain, swim against
not
the currents.
As a rebel per se, but as an innovator.
Yes.
That's what I see.
Yes.
Am I right?
Exactly. I'm always thinking of how can we do this differently and what's the gap that I can fill that
Right.
no one else is standing in.
Right.
And how to find other people that are thinking the same way.
Right.
And so that's where project management sort of enters the chat, as it were. After graduate school, I knew that I wanted to really focus on macro social work. And so
tell us what macro and micro social work are. You told me before, but let's explain it to our listeners.
Yeah,
please.
so that's social work jargon to describe the type of communities you work with.
Yes.
And so micro level social workers are your therapists and direct practitioners. So people providing direct services, whether it be case management,
like CPS.
Yes, your CPS
employees.
workers. Like I say, people that work in hospitals that help connect people to resources,
Okay.
even people in gerontology. It's very broad, but people that work directly
right,
with
like our
individuals.
communities and schools colleagues.
Yes, exactly. CIS workers might consider themselves more micro because they work one-on-one with
Right.
individuals to help them work through different obstacles. Macro social work is something that's not talked about a lot in the realm of social work now. And that's a long history of the shifts in the profession and moving to a more medical model and scientific model that really influenced the emphasis on micro work.
Okay.
But macro social work is how the profession started. It was working within communities and different systems within communities that impact people, systems that create inequities and disparities and all of those things. And so that's where my focus really lied.
Okay.
And so, yes, project management sort of entered the chat because I'm on this side, this community side, trying to figure out how do we organize different initiatives? How do we bring in different people? How do we fill in the voices that are missing from the table? And it's a lot of collaboration with organizations and ultimately a lot of collaboration on projects. And so all of these different initiatives that nonprofits and social service agencies set out to do really fit the realm of a project. A lot of them have a defined start, a defined end. And so I was just on the search for some skills and some resources that could help improve how I approach that work in the community. So that's where project management came in.
So as you speak, I must, because I wouldn't be me if I did not, but I must speak on two of the great legends in the African-American community, as it is still Black History Month. And I read Miss Dorothy Height's biography. I don't remember if it was an autobiography or a biography, but she has a number of them. And I was president of National Council of Negro Women, which she was the president of the national one after Mary McLeod Bethune, another legend, for years. And she was what I'm understanding to be a social worker way back, because she died at almost 100 years old. And so she was on that stage with Dr. King at the March on Washington as a civil rights and social justice advocate. She integrated the Young Women's Christian Association and climbed the ranks in that organization, which we know provides a lot of social services. There are very few YWCAs left. There are mostly YMCAs, Young Men's Christian Association organizations now. But she also did so much to create access to opportunity for minorities, for women, and for those who were traditionally shut out of that access to education, economic opportunity, and so forth. And I think of her work, and I think of what you mentioned, that initially that field was macro social work, and more recently the change to micro has happened. And I also think of one of the other legends who is not touted very frequently, but we are now learning more about, Bayard Rustin, who organized the March on Washington, who was a very active member of the pacifist movement, went to India to study Gandhi's ways under Gandhi's son, taught and mentored Martin Luther King Jr. in nonviolent passive resistance, was a ghostwriter for many of his speeches and the articles that he wrote, or community organizing, which is one of the functions of that type of macro social work, was his forte. And I think of Mr. Bayard Rustin and Miss Dorothy Height. They would be so proud of you.
I'm definitely humbled to hear that.
They would be so proud of you carrying on the work, especially at a critical time like 2025, where we need to ensure that all communities have access to resources, and not just resources. But one of the things that I am so proud and so pleased to be able to work with you to do is to provide very high quality, very well planned programming, educational awareness, and other types of programming to the community. And so they would be proud of you, as I am.
Thank you.
Thank you too for what you're doing.
Absolutely.
So my next question, and this is on the role of project management in your work. How has integrating project management principles enhanced your ability to create and sustain impactful community programs? And if you will, start with, we define social work, but for the people who are new to this, what is project management?
Yes, so I would definitely say for me, project management, like social work, is something that is very malleable, and that's just kind of the nature of it. And so project management is basically the practice of carrying forth an initiative from initiation to close. So it has basically 5 different domains: initiating, planning, monitoring, and executing, and closing. And so the application of sort of those processes to any initiative, it could be as simple as planning your wedding, which I have some experience in that too more recently. But yes, it's something as simple as planning your wedding and
or
going
planning
through
a wedding as an event planner.
Planning and any wedding or any other event where essentially you break down your entire process and utilize different tools throughout to get you from start to finish. So it's you're gathering your requirements, you're understanding and defining what the scope of your event or project is going to be, the resources, including people resources, that you'll need to carry that out, your timelines, your budgets, how you're going to ensure that you actually were successful. What's your definition of done? What metrics are you using to assure that you produce quality, that you produce value as a result? And of course, kind of looking back, analyzing that, and then doing it all over again. So there's lots of project managers, like social workers, are in all kinds of industries, all kinds of fields. So that's why it seemed like the perfect match for me with my social work degree. Or degrees. And so I'm trying to remember the question.
And the other question was, wait a minute, nope. I was done with that. How has integrating project management principles enhanced your ability to create and sustain impactful community programs?
Yes. And so I want to touch on something you mentioned before, which is the programming being well planned and high quality. I think I have project management to thank for that. That is really the benefit of using those things. And so for me, coming into my current role at Baylor, I was tasked with leading out on a lot of different programs. I say a lot. they're frequent programs and things that we do over and over. But yes, events-based programs, opportunity-based programs where we're creating a forum, we're bringing together different people and allowing them to have a space to transfer knowledge and to network and just to grow. And so coming into that, there weren't a lot of formal processes.
Can you mention a few?
Oh.
Like I was at the Women's Empowerment Summit that you did with Waco Independent School District last year.
Yes.
And others. Can you mention a few?
Yeah, a few of our programs that we put out. In the past, we've done Envisioning Equity, an Envisioning Equity series, which was a speaker series of sorts where we would highlight a panel of different voices to discuss a specific systemic inequity. So sometimes education. We've hosted events, Envisioning Equity around criminal justice, community relations, different things like that. So Envisioning Equity.
I spoke on one that was about economics.
Yes, we had one on economic development as well. The Gil Taylor series, which we'll talk about a little bit more, it's also a speaker series. And then the Men's and Women's Empowerment Summits. I'm more heavily involved with the Men's Summit, but we do assist and support the Women's as well, where we bring 120 to 200 Waco ISD students from every middle school and high school in the district. We host them on campus, or we partner with NCC to host them on their campus, and basically give them a full day of enrichment. They go through breakout sessions, they hear from a keynote speaker, they get to network and interact with community members and volunteers that we brought in. And so that's another one of our projects that we support and that I get to help lead out on each year.
So I'm helping with the Women's Empowerment Summit. Help me get it right. I think it's March 16th.
19th.
Whoop.
You say it. Yes. So I'll start with men's because it comes up first. So
yes.
Men's Empowerment Summit with Waco ISD. We'll be hosting them at Baylor University on March 5th. March 5th, Wednesday, all day, they'll be on campus. This year we have a STEM theme. So
Science, technology, engineering, and math.
Yes, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So I have helped curate the whole program of speakers for that day. So we will have several science demonstrations. The students are going to be learning about neurology and the gut microbiome and all kinds of things. And they get to do some hands-on things there with Baylor researchers and faculty and student researchers. And then they'll also hear from a local community member about mechanical engineering.
Wonderful.
So we'll bring someone in to talk about that. And then March 19th.
And you need some volunteers. We discussed that yesterday.
Need about 10 more men to sign up to volunteer. A little later, my information will flash across the screen. So if you are interested, please reach out to me and I will send you the link and give you the entire rundown of what we need. But essentially, we're looking for men from the community to come and engage with our students during our luncheon. And it's just an opportunity for the students to get to know people who are out there and for community members to pour into them, give them encouragement, give them advice, just listen to them and kind of understand where they are in their life and give them that space. So yes, my info will flash across. Feel free to reach out to me if you're interested. And then the Women's Empowerment Summit will be taking place on March 19th. Again, at Baylor University. Several of my colleagues have been working hard to curate the speakers for that. Ms. Houston, of course, you are one of the speakers doing a really important session on Dress for Success and professionalism. And so, yes, we are excited for that. And yeah, I'll be there to support.
Do you need volunteers for that?
I'm not sure, but if you are interested in volunteering, again, feel free to reach out to me and I will connect you. And yeah, we'll get that all filled out. I also want to say that Junior League helps supports the Women's Empowerment Summit.
Yes.
And so they do also handle a lot of the volunteer needs for that. So that might also be another avenue for women to reach out if they are interested in volunteering.
Thank you.
Yes.
Those are very, very rewarding volunteer experiences for the volunteers, but even more so, they're very enriching for the students. They learn a lot. One of the things that the ladies told me when I was the table dialogue facilitator during the luncheon last year is we just need to see some people who look like us and just ask them about what our educational options are, what our career options are after high school. And it was just such a wonderful experience to pour into the girls. So please follow up.
Absolutely. I will say, like I mentioned before, I decided to become a social worker in high school because of social workers that looked like me, that were in my community, that weren't put off or like
Mhm.
scared away by some of the problems and the different things that we were experiencing. So it really is important for our students to see people who look like them in
Right.
different roles. That really does open up a lot for them. But I do want to say, in the midst of all these projects or all these programs and events, when I first came into my role, there really weren't a lot of formal practices or procedures around how to plan for this
Right.
event, how to curate the content, the
Right.
speakers, how to handle the budget. And so, utilizing a lot of my learning through project management, I was able to really create different processes,
Wonderful.
create a host of templates that is now easy for me to plug and play each time.
Baylor should be thanking you profusely.
There's, lots of like different online platforms that I
Mhm.
use just to track the work.
Okay.
And so now being in this for a couple of years, I have different sets of data that I can look back and compare year to year to see what's grown, what has worked well, what is not working well, how can we scale up, how can we take some different approaches. And some of those I will talk about because we have some exciting new things on the horizon for our
Great.
Gil Taylor series.
Great.
And so I'll have some more examples of how I've tweaked things or improved things over the past couple of years.
Love it. Love it. And I can't wait to hear more. So let's talk about the importance of mental health programming. That is something that you and I have been doing together for quite some time in this community. So from your perspective, why is mental health awareness so critical in your community? And what gaps do you see that still need to be addressed?
Yes, it's very, very critical. I keep going back to the community that I grew up in because I think that that is really a foundation for why I'm interested in so many of these things. And so a lot of the things that I experienced in my community as a teenager are things that I hear teenagers talking about right now, today.
Yeah.
Before we started recording, we were talking about Carver Middle School and some different things. And,
Right.
and just I know,
We know
from
those experiences.
exactly, and from interfacing with different groups like CIS and their community youth development group.
CIS is Communities in Schools.
Yes, our local communities and schools chapter, and just hearing different experiences from the students. I'm like, gosh, that sounds so familiar.
Yeah.
And the truth is, when I was growing up or when I was their age, people didn't talk about mental health. They
No.
did not talk about, anxiety. They didn't talk about depression. They didn't talk about just all of the different stressors that teenagers experience, that youth experience, that really get overlooked.
And let's add, because you grew up in Atlanta and I grew up in Houston, and the larger cities were just plagued by crack, cocaine, and other drugs. And we didn't even realize that substance abuse, addiction, whether it's alcohol or drugs like crack or heroin or meth, was a mental illness. No one taught us that.
No.
And therefore, we had limited knowledge of the types of resources that people needed if they were dealing with those mental health issues. And let's not get on the fact that addiction has become criminalized and the prisons are where people end up who really have mental illness, such as addiction, and will not get the treatment that they need, the medical care that they need, even still, because they've been directed into the penal system as opposed to the medical system. But those conditions continue to perpetuate. And the work that you're doing, the work that we have done too together, is part of raising that awareness, right?
Absolutely. I think that's such an important point too, to say that, youth are experiencing things, but that's all within the context of what their parents and what just the broader community is experiencing in terms of addiction, in terms of how poverty influences, trauma influences your mental health. And so it was something that, growing up, it was, well, just don't talk about it. Well, just brush it under the rug. Oh, that's family business. Yep. We don't bring that out. And so I've been passionate about mental health for a very long time. I mentioned before, I am a macro social worker. I have lots of amazing friends who are therapists, who are social workers, and I adore them and I so appreciate the work that they do. But me personally, I knew that I would not be a therapist, but I wanted to be able to still support mental health, promote mental health awareness, still be an advocate, even if I wasn't given those direct services. And so that's kind of where being able to work on community programming, like the programming that we have done with Mental Health Matters, along with several long list of partners, that's where that kind of helps me fill one of my buckets or things that I'm passionate about, in addition to some of the work that I get to do through in my role at Baylor. But yeah, knowing that I wouldn't be a therapist, but on a community level, we need spaces where we're talking about mental health. We're talking about what you can do. We're also normalizing some of these experiences and saying, hey, you don't have to feel stigmatized, because there's an explanation for what you're experiencing, and you're not the only one that's experiencing
and you're not alone. And one of the things that I saw, because we also worked together at a community health center for a brief period of time, but one of the things that I saw during the coronavirus pandemic was the literature and the data that said that a mental health pandemic sprang up alongside the coronavirus pandemic. And that was the catalyst for some of the volunteer mental health awareness work that I began to do and that I looped you in on immediately. We also know, because the literature shows, that culturally competent medical care, which includes mental health care, is an absolute must. And when you think about medical mistrust in communities of color, Black community is our community, so let's talk about it. One of the gaps that I see that needs to be addressed is that people who look like us need to be connecting our community with the institutions like one of our trusted, tried and true partners, Heart of Texas Behavioral Health Network, which used to be MHMRA for so long. Here in this area, they're rebranded as Heart of Texas Behavioral Health Network, but they have a plethora of resources, from counseling to psychiatrists to programs that help with addiction and all sorts of mental illness, from the infant to the geriatric. But they need to be connected to our community by people whom members of our community trust. And Pastor Stimson was gracious enough to host the very first Mental Health Matters program at Open Door Church of God in Christ. Heart of Texas Behavioral Health Network was there. A number of Black psychotherapists and counselors were there, and the community poured out. Also, one gap that we have to constantly be aware of, and that I see you filling, is that kind of ambassador role, that trusted professional role where we can say, hey, come into this space. It's a safe space for you to discuss trauma, depression, addiction, whatever, anxiety, whatever it is, with people, trained psychotherapists and social workers and counselors, some of whom, many of whom, all of whom, depending on the event, look like you. And here are a list of therapists and mental health care facilities that you can utilize, whether you have medical insurance or not. And I think even just the therapy itself oftentimes will not be effective if there is no trust, if there is no cultural
alliance.
Yes, cultural competence. And so to me, that is a gap that we fill. And we have that handout that we always give out with a list of therapists of color and a list of mental health care facilities, because our people need to be able to learn about those resources, learn about the mental health conditions, and learn about where they can go to get help, right?
Yes, I think that definitely something you're hitting on, or something that's coming to mind as I'm listening, is just health literacy and even mental health literacy.
Yes.
Sometimes for a lot of people, it may take a long time before they actually take that step to reach out, to go to a therapist. Even then, it can be confusing, finding someone in network, getting on a wait list, all of these things. There's so many deterrents in between when you learn about this and decide that you are going to see a therapist and actually getting in the door. And so that's
Right.
probably a whole other episode of like,
We can talk
just the
about it later.
process.
Miss Sheila Brown is interested in joining us.
Yes.
She's been with us with our mental health matters work anyway.
Absolutely.
So we got another podcast idea.
We do. But I think even in the meantime, what you're describing with how we create those spaces and say, this is an okay space for you to come into, as a person who's helped organize, but also I'm there attending, you know, I've even had my eyes open to different things. And I'm like, I never
Right.
thought about that. And I walked away with something that was helpful for me understanding
Right.
a certain experience that I have.
Right. Me too.
And so even if that person or, you know, that audience member doesn't then go and say, I think I'm depressed and I'm going to sign up for something, being in the space itself is therapeutic because you're in community. And like we said, this is a space where we are normalizing this language. We are destigmatizing mental illness. We are saying, you know, there is an explanation. You are not crazy. There is an explanation for all of these things that you're experiencing. And I think sometimes just hearing someone say that and recognizing like, oh, that's me. And it's not just me is something that is very therapeutic. It
Very
can
much
relieve
so.
a lot of stress and pressure for people. So.
Very much so. So your upcoming mental health event is what I want to talk about next. And I will tell you, my alumni network is great. And we are constantly getting reports through email and publications from Harvard. And one of the things that opened my eyes is this, and it's very relevant to the Gil Taylor Behavioral Health series. And I hope that you will make the connection because I think you can do it better than I can. But data shows that since the coronavirus pandemic, African American youth are the demographic with the fastest rising suicide rate. That has to be juxtaposed against this important data point, which is prior to the coronavirus pandemic, African Americans did not commit suicide at any statistically significant rate. So we went from not really registering in the suicide data as a people to now our youth being the fastest rising demographic when it comes to suicide rates. You can get some help with a crack addiction. You can get some help with some depression, some schizophrenia, some bipolar disorder. You can't get no help after you have unalived yourself because suicide was your way out because of the mental illness and trauma, let's speak on it, that you have experienced. That's another gap because it is so stigmatized in the Black community, the Asian community, the Latino community, the Arab community. Pick them. And when we say Black community, we don't just mean Black American. We mean Afro-Caribbean. We mean Afro-Latino. We mean African. Mental illness and accessing mental health care resources is still highly stigmatized. And therefore, our youth are taking their lives because they feel trapped and they feel that there is no way out, that there is no hope, and that there is no way that they can experience better days. We have a clarion call to do something about the lack of mental health literacy and the disconnect between the resources that are there, even the free ones, even the ones that are for people who don't have medical insurance, and the community members who need them the most. I'll say this and then I'm going to pass the mic. We know that poverty is trauma. We know that racism is trauma. There's no person in our community that can escape either one of those, if not both. I know that I have family members who pick cotton. My mom's generation, and mom said she didn't pick cotton, but she picked greens and peas. She was a sharecropper too. But some of them pick cotton. My grandparents definitely pick cotton. There is no way when that's your start in this world that poverty will escape you, right? And so when you talk about poverty being trauma, racism, no matter your socioeconomic status being trauma, we are traumatized people at birth and from generations. So that gap in mental health literacy that could be one of the contributing factor to this increasing suicide rate in our youth is something that we need to address, and you are doing something about it. So would you care to tell us more about the Gil Taylor Gil Taylor Behavioral Health Series?
Yes, absolutely. There definitely is glaring connection with suicide. And so Gil Taylor was a Baylor alum. To give you sort of the background, and for those listening, the background of how this came to be, Gil Taylor was a Baylor alum, multi-generational Baylor alum, so I think maybe like third generation or something to that effect. But he died by suicide about 13 years ago. He wasn't a youth. He was, older, married, family, but was fighting a silent battle. And so after his death, his family wanted to do something about it. They really felt compelled to get involved in their community and try to raise awareness so that other families didn't experience that same type of loss. And so through a series of events, the family came to Baylor and said, hey, we would like to trust you all with this programming, or, just ask you guys to kind of carry this forward. And so his parents, Charlotte and Dudley, worked with Baylor University and the Diana R. Garland School of Social Work to kind of forge a partnership.
Is that where you obtained your master's?
That is where I got my master's. So yes, they created a partnership with the School of Social Work, who created a partnership with our office in External Affairs to essentially host this programming twice a year. At the time, I think it started out as once a year, where they would host these symposiums where there was training for behavioral health practitioners, as well as just general awareness and information for the community. And so over time, and as I've come into the role, it's kind of bloomed into a series that we put on twice a year, where our goal is, of course, always to provide continuing education credits. So for social workers, counselors, and there's a couple of other LMFTs, LPCs,
licensed marriage family therapists, licensed professional counselors.
Yes, you guys know who you are.
Psychotherapists.
Yes,
right. Mental health
therapists, behavioral health practitioners.
Yes.
And so we always host a speaker who is, of course, licensed, so that way we are able to give you those credits. And then in addition, we build in some other things. Sometimes there's workshops. There's some new things we're doing with this upcoming event, but we put these on in the fall and in the spring with the goal of raising awareness, also providing some training and learning and development opportunities. And like you said, just getting different people in the room who can help each other. I will say our Gil Taylor series last spring featured a LCSW, so a licensed clinical social worker who also runs, she runs a private practice, but also runs a farmer's market and health and wellness business. And so she came and talked to us about psychological well-being and all these different things. But the interesting part about our audience was that almost everyone there was in the helping profession in some way. Some of them were behavioral health practitioners. Heart of Texas Behavioral Health participated in that event, so a lot of their team members were there, but also there were people from other social service agencies and people that were just caregivers in their own personal lives. And so it created a space for those who are giving the help to receive some help, to receive some reprieve, to, interact and really build relationships with each other and figure out how those new networks could be beneficial for their clients. And so that was something that was really special.
Wow.
Yeah.
From what I know, there are two intended audiences for this Gil Taylor speaker series. There are Baylor students, and then Baylor staff and faculty, and also community members. Can you tell us a little bit about the program and how you have scheduled to reach those two intended audiences?
Yes.
Please.
So each year we try to strike a balance. And so I think that's the benefit of our office coming in, is that we are externally facing. And so relating with the community is what we do all the time. And so our fall event series is generally It's always open to the public, but a lot of our marketing is really targeted to Baylor faculty, staff, and students. So we have a wonderful counseling department. Baylor does an awesome job of just making sure that mental health resources are available and accessible for their students. So there's a lot of different channels and just key players that help make that happen. And so we usually get a really nice turnout on our Baylor side, which is exciting.
Yes.
And then in the spring, our event and our marketing is really targeted to the community. So we host our fall events on Baylor campus. We host our spring events out in the community. So that way it's just more accessible. And so we really do a lot of work, try to do a lot of work. I'm saying I do a lot. I run an awful lot in the spring to try to get as many people from the community as possible to come out. It's not an event.
Please come out.
Yes, please come out. It is free. We always feed you. That is free. And so it's not an event that's just for people who are behavioral health practitioners. Anyone and everyone can draw something from these events, some encouragement, some new tool to use, or a new connection.
So how can people get involved?
Yes. So
and when is this upcoming one?
Yes. So this upcoming event is just about a month out. By the time this airs, will be 1 month away. So April 3rd, we will be hosting our spring Gil Taylor Behavioral Health Series at McLennan Community College in their conference center. The event is from 11:30 a.m. to 2 p.m. and it is a two-part event. So the first half of it will be joined by Dr. Megan O'Reilly, who is a licensed psychologist and the founder of Inherent Value Psychology. She is out of Stanford. And so she'll be coming to join us to talk about systems. So a lot of the things that we discussed today, she's going to touch on how systems impact our mental health and what we can do as a community to combat that. And then the second half of our event, we'll be hosting for the first time a student panel. So we'll have students from Tarleton University, McLennan Community College, and Baylor University to talk about mental health experiences. And Dr. Megan will be moderating that for us. And then in addition to that, I will tell you to please follow me on LinkedIn because for the first time, at least since I've been in the role in the last 2.5 years, we will be able to offer a hybrid event. So thanks to MCC, we'll be able to do a webinar in addition to our live in-person event that will air at the same time on Zoom. And I will be dropping the details for that in the coming weeks on LinkedIn. So please be sure to follow me there.
And so for those who may or may not understand this jargon, because we're in academia also, the hybrid event means that you can either attend in person or you can attend online through some virtual platform like Zoom.
Yes.
Through Zoom. So you will be sending out information so that if people cannot make it to the in-person event, they can log in and attend virtually.
Yes. If you follow me on LinkedIn, I will be putting up the details.
What's your?
So it's Christian, Christian, Howard Agu. And I think they'll have it up on the screen as well. So you guys can just go and follow me there, and I'll be dropping the registration information for the Zoom option, the webinar option in the coming weeks. But for all of you who are in Waco, please feel free to join us in person. As I mentioned, we have free lunch for you. And MCC's conference center is just a great space. Ample parking, everything's free. You have nothing to lose.
And MCC is McLennan Community College. So it's at the campus of McLennan Community College in their conference center. So thank you for that information. And again, the Gil Taylor Behavioral Health Speaker Series is it's April 3rd from
11:30 a.m. to 2 p.m. The first segment will be from 11:30 to 1, and then our student panel will start at about 1:15 to 2.
And it is at the campus of McLennan Community College in their conference center. And there is an in-person attendance option as well as a Zoom option. It's free and it's open to the public. So please come out. As part of the Mental Health Matters Program Planning Team, a group effort that Ms. Agu and I are part of, and as the Mental Health Chair for the Waco Central Texas Links Incorporated chapter, I've been planning and organizing youth and adult mental health awareness programming in Waco and Central Texas for a little over a year now. Ms. Agu has been a dutiful partner in this very important work, and I must credit her with bringing to my attention the Compass and Light documentary film series that covers various mental health topics, such as post-traumatic stress disorder and trauma, depression, addiction, suicide, bipolar disorder, eating disorders. There's 7 documentary films that touch upon 7 different topics related to mental health. We have worked together to provide these film discussions and other mental health awareness programs in our community. And this is work that we are very passionate about. So thank you for all that you do to increase mental health awareness and to reduce the stigma associated with mental illness and mental health care access. Your work has not gone unnoticed and is needed so very much. I've attended 2 of Ms. Agu's Gil-Taylor programs at Baylor University, and I've learned valuable information and made connections with people who are also doing work in the mental health space. And I want to, again, personally encourage those listeners who are in or near Waco to register for this free luncheon. And now that I know that there's a Zoom option, really any listener anywhere, I encourage you to register for this program. You will learn a lot and be enriched. So I think you'll find it extremely worthwhile. Thank you so much for your time and insight. It has been a pleasure to learn from and dialogue with you today, Ms. Agu, and I hope to see all of you and you on April 3rd at Baylor University for the Gil-Taylor Behavioral Health Luncheon.
Right, McLennan Community College.
Don't go to Baylor University this year. Go to McLennan Community College in their conference center for the Gil-Taylor Behavioral Health Luncheon on April 3rd. My apologies.
Yes.
Do you have any parting words for our listeners or for me?
I, again, echo everything that you've said. Please, please, please join us on April 3rd. Thank you for having me. Thank you for creating this space and just allowing us to come in and talk about what's going on in our communities. Thank you.
You are so welcome. So I will say the details are forthcoming, but we will have another Black Family Wellness Expo. Ms. Agu and I planned the anchor event through our Mental Health Matters planning team for the 2024 Black Family Wellness Expo that was hosted by the Waco Central Texas chapter of the Links. This year, that event will be in Killeen, and the date is March 8th. It will be at the Douse Community Center. And 4 Links chapters, Waco Central Texas, Town Lake, and Lone Star, and Austin will be putting that event together. It will be from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Douse Community Center in Killeen. And there will be a segment on mental health. I will be one of the panel speakers for that segment. So we will send information out as it becomes available, probably posted in the comments of this podcast when it airs. So there's plenty going on around town, and I hope to be able to keep you updated on some of those things. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful day.